Welcome. Thanks for joining us for the Great Books Show. I'm Dave Burke, filling in for Jack Hatfield. Our panel meets periodically to discuss great works of classic and modern literature. The selections being discussed today are several poems by Wilfred Owen. The British poet Wilfred Owen published only 5 poems before he was killed in World War I at the age of 25. His most famous poems about the Great War were published posthumously. Owen's poetry often conjures up images from his own experience in the trenches. Those experiences were captured partly as therapy for Owen's shell shock, as PTSD was then known. His most famous poems about the psychological and physical horrors of war were a shocking contrast to the patriotic or romantic depictions of glory and righteousness then prevalent. Ironically, this chronicler of trench warfare and gas attacks was killed in France on November 4th, 1918, exactly 1 week before the Armistice. We've chosen 5 poems to discuss on today's program. They are not the 5 published in his lifetime. The first is his most famous, Dolce et Decorum Est. In this poem, a soldier vividly describes the actual experience of a sweet and noble death. Next is Strange Meeting, in which a soldier has a fateful encounter with a stranger. In Arms and the Boy, the speaker relishes the image of an innocent boy examining implements of war. The Last Laugh is a kind of animated audioscape of sounds on the battlefield. Finally, the speaker in the Anthem for Doomed Youth wonders about soldiers and their lovers' preparation for war and death. Here are a few of the questions that occurred to me as I read through these poems. What is it about Owen's poetry that makes it so memorable? Is Owen a poet of despair, or realism, or resignation? Is there any hope? And is there any point to life? What is war? Please stay with us as we read and discuss the poems by Wilfred Owen. And I think the best way to get the discussion started is to actually read one of these. Joe, why don't you read for us Dolce et Decorum Est?
Dolce et Decorum Est by Wilfred Owen. Bent double, like old beggars under sacks, knock-kneed, coughing like hags, we cursed through sludge, till on the haunting flares we turned our backs and towards our distant rest began to trudge. Men marched asleep. Many had lost their boots, but limped on, bloodshot. All went lame, all blind, drunk with fatigue, deaf even to the hoots of gas shells dropping softly behind. Gas! Gas! Quick, boys! An ecstasy of fumbling, fitting the clumsy helmets just in time. But someone still was yelling out and stumbling and floundering like a man in fire or lime. Dim through the misty panes and thick green light, as under a green sea I saw him drowning. In all my dreams, before my helpless sight, he plunges at me, guttering, choking, drowning. If in some smothering dreams you too could pace behind the wagon that we flung him in, and watch the white eyes writhing in his hanging face like a devil's, sick of sin. If you could hear at every jolt the blood come gurgling from the froth-corrupted lungs, obscene as cancer, bitter as the cud of vile, incurable sores on innocent tongues, my friend, you would not tell with such high zest to children ardent for some desperate glory the old lie, Dulce et decorum est pro patria mori.
Thank you. Obviously, the title translated would be it is fitting and proper or noble, sweet, to die for one's country. Yes. And so the tonic, the title is ironic, I would say.
Yes.
When he describes this, who is he describing this to? Is he telling us, the reader? Is he telling a friend, or is he telling the world?
I think it's important to recognize that this was written after he'd come back from being injured in the trenches in France. And he was in Scotland recovering, and he did some of his writing from the experience of having been in the trenches and seeing it happen. And so it was, since he died before the war was over, this was written in the time of, this is his actual experience of seeing this happen.
So he's more like a reporter, but painting a picture.
He's writing about his experiences and how he viewed the war, and it sounds like it was a pretty horrible war that he viewed.
He certainly focuses on all the tangible things, the smells, the sights, the sounds of this.
How does he elicit this horror in his poem?
I think that he does it primarily through the description of the death, the dying process, and the death of this man who is, they're trying to transport out, it sounds like, of the battle area, but he's in the process of dying. His lungs have already been seared by the gas, and he's dying. So he elicits it by focusing on the details of the death process, the white eyes writhing in his face, the gargling from the froth-corrupted lungs, the blood coming out. He makes it as stark and bright as possible, I think, in order to emphasize the horror. He lets the facts themselves transmit the horror. And getting back to your question, Dave, I had the sense that initially, up until the very last stanza, he was describing, it was reportage. And in the last stanza, he clearly seems to be addressing someone who may or may not have ever had an experience of battle, but clearly is a...
my friend.
My friend.
He says,
He
my
addresses
friend.
someone as my friend.
Right, so it's clearly somebody else.
Or is it a universal reader?
I don't know, but it by the fact that it says you would not tell with such high zest to children in order for. I mean, that's not something I would ever tell to children.
But apparently that was common.
That's right. That's what I'm assuming.
He's saying that people thought, hey, go fight for your country and die for your country, that it's a great thing to do, but it's not so great.
Right, it's not so great.
Remember,
at
this
all.
is World War I, the war to end all
I
wars.
think it's important to recognize the English poets like Kipling and Gunga Din or Tennyson in the Charge of the Light Brigade, where you had these same kind of carnage, what made it heroic. And here you're about 20 years later, 15 years later, and it's not heroic at all.
Yeah.
It's ugly.
And the thing is, he describes this ugly death, but in the first paragraph, he describes the ugly life, what the living are doing. They lost their boots, they limped on, bloodshot, all went lame, all blind, drunk with fatigue.
I think.
So war is horrible not only for the dead, but war is horrible to live through for the living. And then if you see the people dying, you have nightmares that never leave you.
The thing that struck me about this poem and some of the other ones in here is the rhythm. That he underscores his point by these choppy, kind of imperative rhythms. First, in the first paragraph, it's lugubrious and schleppy, if that's a word. Just the way it scans, bent double like old beggars under sacks. You can feel the laborious pulling. And so that's not glamorous. But then, gas, gas, quick, boys. I think that's part of the feeling of the poem. It's not just the words.
It's the immediacy and the feeling that the whole thing can just explode at a moment.
And it did.
And it did.
Gas, gas, quick, boys.
Yeah. And that's the nature of war. You think you've got it knocked, and all of a sudden everything falls apart. And you have no control. And remember, this was the last war that they allowed. It was soon after this war they didn't allow gas anymore, even though it's still being used in Syria, and it was used in Iraq and other places. But this was a common utilization of warfare in the First World War.
And I guess people didn't know that, because he's saying that if you're waving these patriotic flags, I've got something for you to hear that's not that.
Right. This is at the end of the, is sort of the sunsetting period of the colonial period of both the French and British armies that had gone on for 250 years before then. And, there's a large part of the British population that thought this was what you did, is you gave your life for your country.
For the empire.
The empire,
Noble service in India or something.
Does anyone know where the quote came from? I have a feeling that this came from some Latin writer.
Yeah.
It is.
It's Virgil or maybe, or
it's a Roman.
It's a Roman, yeah.
It's a Roman saying about, I forgot the author, but a common Roman.
Sweet and fitting it is.
Right.
Yeah, I have some footnotes on here, but I don't think it says
where
that came from. Shall we go to the second one?
Sure.
The second one that we're going to discuss is another war poem, A Strange Meeting. And I'll read this one. It seemed that out of battle I escaped down some profound dull tunnel long since scooped through granites which titanic wars had groined. Yet also their encumbered sleepers groaned, too fast in thought or death to be bestirred. Then, as I probed them, one sprang up and stared with piteous recognition in fixed eyes, lifting distressful hands as if to bless. And by his smile, I knew that sullen hall. By his dead smile, I knew that we stood in hell. With 1,000 pains, that vision's face was grained, yet no blood reached there from the upper ground, and no guns thumped, or down the flues made moan. Strange friend, I said, here is no cause to mourn. None, said that other, save the undone years, the hopelessness. Whatever hope is yours was my life also. I went hunting wild after the wildest beauty in the world, which lies not calm in eyes or braided hair, but mocks the steady running of the hour, and if it grieves, grieves richlier than here. For by my glee might many men have laughed, and of my weeping something had been left, which must die now. I mean the truth untold, the pity of war, the pity war distilled. Now men will go content with what we spoiled, or discontent, boil bloody and be spilled. They will be swift with swiftness of the tigress. None will break ranks, though nations trek from progress. Courage was mine, and I had mystery. Wisdom was mine, and I had mastery. To miss the march of this retreating world into vain citadels that are not walled. Then, when much blood had clogged their chariot wheels, I would go up and wash them from sweet wells, even with truths that lie too deep for taint. I would have poured my spirit without stint, but not through wounds nor the cess of war. Foreheads of men have bled where no wounds were. I am the enemy you killed, my friend. I knew you in this dark, for so you frowned yesterday through me as you jabbed and killed. I parried, but my hands were loath and cold. Let us sleep now. What happened there? He found himself.
He found himself in hell. That was the first surprising thing, because you figure you die, you go to heaven, you're fighting for your country, right? You know, he dies, he finds himself in hell. And it's a quiet hell, too. And he sees someone, and he starts a conversation with them, and it turns out to be the person he killed.
But a very similar person to himself, with all the aspirations for his life, with all the bravado that he would want to show. He talks about that and how he didn't shrink back, and it was exciting, and it had all these possibilities, and then...
And all the possibilities never materialized because they're dead.
That's it.
Mm-hmm.
But,
and he, too, wanted to tell the truth of war, the pity of war, the horror of war, of people dying, just like he did.
Apparently, he didn't know until he met the guy that he was in hell and that he was dead.
Evidently, yeah.
By his smile, I knew that sullen hall. By his dead smile, I knew we stood in hell.
And you wonder whether this was sort of an apparition in his mind, and this is what he's going through as he sort of reflects upon what he's been through.
Yeah, but the line he says is, "Strange friend," I said, "here is no cause to mourn." And then the friend talks back, and he gives him all the reasons why he should mourn. You know,
That's
his
what I'm
lost
confused
life,
about.
his lost opportunity, his
Yeah.
lost chance, the courage and wisdom that was ended, the chance for the truth of the war to be told.
Well, it was ironic. I had the sense that it was somewhat ironic. He says, "Strange friend, there's no cause to mourn." He says, "No, except everything." No, save the undone years, which is basically everything else for the rest of my life and yours. So I thought it was sort of ironic. He was.
And then he carries all the different things he did that are very similar to any young person, young man
Right.
generally.
Right.
And the way he would have liked to have lived, and he doesn't have any of that for himself.
So it has a similar idea as the first poem we read, where this is how it really is, folks, and I woke up to this when I died. The guy told me what was really going on, and so it's just another lesson that he teaches us about what war is.
There's a little bit of a different emphasis here, though. I think you're absolutely right, but I think that the emphasis here, there's another emphasis, and that is, they're just like us. They're enemies, but they're just like us, essentially.
With the same dreams, the same aspirations, the same
Right.
and the same lost opportunities from our deaths.
Right.
Both of us. Him and I also.
Relative to that line where he says, "Now men will go content with what we spoiled, or discontent, boil bloody and be spilled." Can someone explain that line to me?
I puzzled over that, and I thought the victors will go on their merry way with having despoiled the land and killed a lot of people, but the victims, they will be spilled.
Or if they're not happy with the situation at the end of the war, they're going to go to war again.
Or
They're going to
discontent,
boil bloody and be spilled again.
One more time.
Right? So
Yeah.
you stay
he
with the
didn't
status
live to
quo,
know,
or you
about Hitler.
do it again and again. and yes, isn't that ironic?
Yeah.
He must have known that the war was winding down, though. I mean, he must have. It was only a week before the Armistice.
Yeah.
No,
Right.
that's when he was killed. But when he wrote these poems, it was in his convalescence, generally.
Oh.
Yeah.
Do you know when that was relative to where in the war?
About a year and a half before he went back. He went back into the action in April of 18, and he ended up dying in November of 18.
So this is what? It's been
a
15
year,
then, or
16 and 17.
Okay.
When he was writing many of these.
Here's an interesting line in there. None will break ranks, though nations trek from progress. So I take that to mean that nobody ever learns that it's not the war to end all wars, that they'll march on, and nations will trek from progress. They won't progress toward peace. It'll just be an eternal condition of warfare.
Right.
The progress, to some extent, is an illusion.
Yeah. So it's his saying that he doesn't see much hope in the future. It'll just happen again,
Right.
and again,
Right.
and again.
And it did, and it does.
And also, this poem ends on an invitation to let us sleep now. Like the only peace you're going to get is here.
Is eternal sleep, yes.
Yeah, even in hell, it's better than being in the battle, because here at least you can sleep. And he also talked about the foreheads of men had bled where no wounds were. He was talking about people who were hurt not only through being killed, but like PTSD, and what happened to him was
It was called shell shock in those days.
shell
So,
shock in
right.
those days.
The same thing.
You know, so this war gives you mental problems too, that you have to deal with this.
People came back and they were in hospitals in the 20s, in the early 30s, in VA hospitals, who suffered in any number of different ways from the trench warfare of the First World War.
Very interesting poem.
The beginning of the poems is interesting because he doesn't think he's dead yet. He says, "It seemed that out of battle I escaped. Down some profound, dull tunnel he went down to hell. Long since scooped through granites which titanic wars had groined. So the warring factions had been going on forever, and they dug out a trench where they fought still, it seems.
Well, the name of the poem is "Strange Meeting."
Yeah.
And you know, and so this is sort of a hallucinogenic thing that he's reflecting on. This is his dream. This is his.
Right.
Why do you think he refers to him as strange friend? Getting back to the strange meeting thing. Why strange friend? The man at the end calls him simply friend.
Right. He's strange friend because
I am the enemy you killed, my friend.
Right.
Well,
Strange friend,
he
I
describes him as springing up from these sleepers and stared with piteous recognition in fixed eyes. So there's something strange about the way he appears, right? And he lifts his distressful hands as if to bless and gives them a really strange smile. So he's like, figure out, what is this guy? How is this guy relating to me? And then he finds out.
So he starts out initially. The initial interaction with the man is somewhat at a distance.
Yeah, and he says strange friend.
Is somewhat unclear about what this is all about. But by the end of the poem, the man he killed just refers to him simply as my friend.
Yep.
we're all in this together.
We're all in this together.
Or
no matter where we start.
co-conspirators in this thing,
Yeah.
You could have killed me.
and we'd still be here. And
Yes.
with this, we still find ourselves both in hell.
Yes.
Yeah, let us sleep now. That's what the other guy says.
Right.
So,
And why ellipsis?
yeah. All right. Poem number 3, The Last Laugh. Maureen, would you like to read that for us?
All right. Oh, Jesus Christ, I'm hit, he said, and died. Whether he vainly cursed or prayed indeed, the bullets chirped, in vain, vain, vain. Machine guns chuckled, tut, 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 and the big gun guffawed. Another sighed, oh, mother, mother, dad, then smiled at nothing, childlike, being dead. And the lofty shrapnel cloud leisurely gestured, fool, and the splinters spat and tittered. My love, one moaned. Love language sensed seemed his mood, till slowly lowered, his whole face kissed the mud, and the bayonet's long teeth grinned. Rabbles of shells hooted and groaned, and the gas hissed. And that's called The Last Laugh.
Who has the last laugh?
War.
Obviously, the implements of war did.
Yeah.
The guns laughing and bullets and the shrapnel and the bayonets and all these implements of war just having the last laugh as these soldiers died.
So it's the implements of war seem human, or to have a life of their own and disregard the humans.
Yeah.
No, not. I wouldn't say disregard.
Not disregard.
They regard.
Go to
They
the
regard
mark.
them. Yeah,
Yeah.
They regard them with contempt and with scorn.
They were happy that
all
the
these
people
things
were
that
dying.
all these things that they're reaching out to are totally useless. Jesus Christ, mother, dad, and the
And my
woman that he
love.
loves.
Yeah.
They're of no use. They're of no use to these dying men.
I think he animates these inanimate objects there, but I think he does that elsewhere too.
With the boy, the lad, arm and the boy.
Arms and the boy.
Arms and the
also.
boy. He talks about that. yes.
Okay. I thought it was somewhere else too, but yeah, he thinks that the war and the bullets, the shells. Which is the poem where he talks about the screaming choir of the shells? Or something?
Oh, that's
Maybe
the
we-
anthem for doomed
Oh,
youth.
maybe we didn't read that one.
Okay.
But yeah, he's got this thing about not humanizing, but
Anthropomorphized.
anthropomorphizing. Yeah, the implements of war.
Well, that poem, it's saying that the implements of war are throwing a funeral for the people who are dying, and they compare the bullets to the choir, right, at the funeral, different things to the candles.
And in this poem, they're showing the implements of war being almost laughing at mankind or people using it. And you know, it's joyous on one side, and it's the juxtaposition between a dying human, man in these cases, and you know, the implements that are just, you know, having a frolic about them.
Well, they're getting their job done.
Yeah,
aren't
that's right.
they?
Sure.
With that happy thought, I think I'll wrap up our discussion for today. And as it happens, this is the last episode of the Great Books Show. And we're sorry that Jack Hatfield, our usual moderator, couldn't be here tonight. But we've enjoyed bringing literature into your homes for the last probably 20 years.
20
we've been
years.
doing this. I know I'm one of
has.
the original guys, Jack is, and we've had various personnel changes over the years. But for our thousands of fans out there, or college students doing their homework and watching this on YouTube, now you've got one for Wilfred Owen that you can steal our brilliant thoughts from. But thank you all, and thanks to NCTV, and especially to Jack Hatfield, and we wish him well in the future.
Great.